data released by Labour has revealed that some people in England waited up to 2.5 days for an ambulance, with new figures showing it was the busiest January on record for the most serious 999 call-outs.
Well, South Central Ambulance Service has the third best response time in the country and gave Good Morning Britain exclusive access to show the range of cases and pressures frontline NHS workers face.
Mode activated.
We are currently on our way to a Category 2 call. A 23-year-old male with major blood loss. Hello, ambulance. Can I have an ECG, please?
Absolutely. Everything was really blurry.
So just cleaning up after our last patient. Unfortunately, the poor lad was vomiting blood, so we need to make sure that everything is just pretty spick and span, ready for our next patient.
We'll complete our paperwork, which, depending on how complicated the job is, it can take up to about half an hour or so.
Can you just confirm that you are now right on the job over?
We are just en route to a female who has taken an overdose this morning. Going to go in and assess, see what the situation is, and either convey to hospital or refer to mental health services. Mental health is something we do see really often as an ambulance service, as patients are not getting the support in the community from mental health teams, and therefore adds a lot of pressure to our already pressured service.
We've got a job.
Yeah, sorry, we're going to have to go.
50-year-old male unconscious.
Some of the stuff that we have to deal with can be challenging and distressing sometimes.
How much have you had to drink today?
Became aggressive towards us on the way in. That does happen quite often, probably once a shift, but it's just part and parcel of the job, I guess.
I have had verbal aggression and abuse shouted at me.
Can be dangerous at times doing this role. We never know what we're going to walk into.
I think we are used sometimes as an overflow to GPs. They can't get hold of the GP, so they therefore phone 111. But we are all good to go now, over.
So that's us an hour overdue our meal break. So yeah, quick half an hour, then back out. We've got a young chap in there who's taken a toxic dose of his medication. We need to get into hospital pretty quick. He's potentially very ill. The sort of jobs that affect me are jobs that involve children. Being a dad myself, it is difficult to sort of turn those emotions off.
I think since COVID, I think a lot of people have lost respect for the service, but I still absolutely love my job day in, day out. So we've come to the end of our day. We have attended to 4 patients, we've done our end of shift checks, and then we are back for a night shift tomorrow.
Well, paramedic and clinical team educator Kimberley, who you saw in that report, joins us now from the ambulance base in Southampton. Kimberley, you know, what you do, thank goodness for people like you and for Brian as well. The trouble is, of course, that you mentioned in your report so many people, you can't get to them on time, and sometimes the attitude towards you personally as a result is not pleasant. You face abuse. What are the biggest frustrations for you right now?
I think with the ambulance service at the moment is that we are experiencing really, really high demand. Our calls are categorised from the most severe patients down to the ones that may not need an ambulance, and we are doing our very best to get to those patients. Sometimes, as a result, we are seeing that patients are potentially deteriorating from not being able to get there on time, but nevertheless, we still do our absolute best to get them to a place, for example, hospital, where they can be treated. In terms of abuse, we do experience abuse, sometimes on a daily basis. I think it's just something that's the norm now, that we just come into work and we you know, we understand that it's something that we can face, but we do have mechanisms in place to either take ourselves away from that situation, or, for example, we've got body-worn cameras now within SCAS, which is a choice that staff can wear them, but they are there to either de-escalate situations or be used as evidence for, you know, example, if we take them to the police.
Kimberley, you've been doing this job now for, I think, 4 years. You've been on the front line as a paramedic from before the pandemic, the end of lockdown, all the pressures since. Has there ever been a point over those 4 years where you felt things were getting easier, the pressure was getting less, or has it just got harder and harder and harder over those 4 years?
I think there's definitely been a change. So I did a 3-year degree, which the pressure wasn't as, you know, we weren't seeing as many patients back then. And then over the last 4 years since being on the front line and then after COVID, we've definitely seen an increase in patients. We are so stretched as an ambulance service. I think since COVID, it's held back a lot of appointments, or patients have been unable to get hold of their GP sometimes, so therefore might leave it, or they're not sure where else to seek guidance or support for their health needs. So therefore they might deteriorate. We've got patients that you know, are having additional health needs since COVID, for example, more risk of heart attacks and strokes. So we're seeing a lot more. So it hasn't really got easier. I think it's just, you know, we're always increasing in demand.
We hear a lot about elderly patients and falls. It's one of the biggest killers, of course, of older people. How often, Kimberley, do you get out to an elderly person who's fallen and they have been on the floor for hours and hours and hours? What category does that fall into, and how soon should you expect an ambulance?
So with elderly fallers, we're seeing them daily. They all have additional health needs, you know, social concerns. They might need mobility aids. So we're seeing quite a lot of elderly fallers in the community. In terms of categories, most often they come under category 3, but for example, if they have chest pain or shortness of breath or major blood loss with their fall, then it will come under category 2. In terms of timeframes, I can't give you a timeframe on what you should expect for an ambulance. However, I can tell you we have seen increased wait times for elderly fallers on the floor, and unfortunately it can be upsetting, and I do feel guilty when I go out to them and they've been on the floor, for example, 4 hours, because unfortunately we do know that it causes more harm to them, but we are doing our absolute very best for those patients and provide the best care that we can when we get there.
Kimberley, what would you say to, if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago, or if you're talking to young people today, age 16, 17, 18, 19, if you're talking to yourself 10 years ago, would you say, don't go and be a paramedic, it's a nightmare, it's too much pressure, I can't deal with it? Or would you say, even when it's hard, it's still a brilliant, fulfilling job to do? What would you tell yourself?
This job is incredible. You know, we are so privileged that we are able to go into people's lives and be that person at their time of need. I would encourage people to do this job, but I think you definitely have to be very strong-minded. You know, we see things on a daily basis that no one should really see. Sometimes we do go to some really awful things, but I think it's really important that people maybe start looking into healthcare. You know, we need more staff, we need more people to be able to treat our patients, to give the care that we need, that they need.
Yeah, Kimberley, you're so committed to your job. I just want to ask you, because we're being inundated this morning with people who've talked about ambulance delays. How many times do you think, in a week perhaps, if we'd got there earlier, that person could have been saved?
It's difficult to give you numbers in terms of that, but often we are getting to our category 1 calls on time, and that should be between 7 to 8 minutes that we should get there. However, we are seeing a delay in our kind of category 2, category 3 calls. We try and get there as quickly as we can, obviously. safe.
What kind of things would the
as
category
possible.
2 be?
Oh, sorry, what did you say, Ed?
What are the things? What would be the category 2
so
things
category
where you're
2
delayed?
So category 2 things might be like strokes or chest pain, difficulty breathing. So sometimes we could be delayed to get to those. I think we should get to them roughly between 16, 17 minutes. But yeah, it is sad sometimes, and you do feel guilty, and sometimes you do think that if we got there sooner, would we have made a difference? But in that moment, you just get on and do your job and treat the patient and get them to hospital.
Well, Kimberley, it's not for lack of you trying to get there on time, is it? This is a systemic problem, and you shouldn't feel the guilt. We're so grateful for what you do, and you know, we need more of you. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to talk to you this morning. We really appreciate you taking time out.
Great to see you inspiring young people to follow your lead as well.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We have so many stories. Rob says, I called 999 because I thought my dad was having another heart attack. They told me an ambulance would be here in 15 hours. I ended up taking him to A&E myself. He died the next day. Janine, my auntie of 95, fell twice last year, had to wait all day on the floor waiting for an ambulance. She died before they arrived. She wasn't a priority because she was conscious and could speak at the time of falling, but she quickly deteriorated. I mean, there's just story after story. Of course, there are positive stories as well, and Kimberley is a positive example of the paramedics who are doing everything they can to help.
But we need people like Kimberley to stay as paramedics, and that means we've got to do a better job of supporting them to do their job.
In a statement, the Department of Health and Social Care said waiting times have reduced substantially since their peak in December. Our urgent and emergency care recovery plan will help people to be seen quicker, including by getting 800 new ambulances on the road. And we're investing £150 million to support people experiencing a mental health crisis. Because as we heard from Jackie earlier, mental health is a big reason why paramedics
and from Kimberley too in the report.